Okay, good afternoon. Again. Scholars at Risk is an international network of higher education institutions dedicated to protecting scholars and promoting academic freedom around the world. The University of Deusto is also committed to this aim that has a direct relation with SDG 16. In July 2016, we expressed our support as a university to the initiative Academics for Peace in Turkey. And accordingly, we invited Professor Kaga Aykak to participate in our interim final conference held in that moment. Later on, in October 2016, Deusto joined Scholars at Risk Network with the aim to make another contribution to promote academic freedom through university and scholars networking. The University of Deusto is always ready to collaborate with other institutions to promote justice and academic freedom. For instance, in 2017, we participated in the campaign to support Central European University when this public institution was severely pressed by the Hungarian government. More recently, both our university and the Green Rose Project Consortium stood in solidarity with Paise Group and Tinai from the University of Salanzi, who had been sentenced to 25 months for signing a peace petition in Turkey. These are just two examples of the commitment of the university with the protection of academic freedom and freedom of expression. In this session, we are here to know more about the work of the Scholars at Risk, one of the social international initiatives that make up universities in the work of achieving goals like SDG 16. And for that, we have in New York, Madeleine Everett, who is ready to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Maddie, and I am the newest addition to the Scholars at Risk membership team. In my role, I support outreach efforts to expand our international network of higher education members, implement strategies to engage our current members, and organize the Scholars at Risk Speaker Series event. The University of Deusto has recently joined our network and really has been a wonderful advocate for Scholars at Risk, SAR abbreviated. We are very thankful for the opportunity to present our work at this conference. This presentation will introduce the work of Scholars at Risk, focusing on our three core program areas. Scholars at Risk is an international network of institutions and individuals whose collective mission is to protect scholars and promote academic freedom. Scholars at Risk is a practical, collective way to meet the urgent needs of scholars, students, and universities under threat. Together, we meet this mission through three core program areas: protection, advocacy, and research and learning. So the next slide will show a quick 5-minute video, which will give a brief background regarding SAR's mission and the courageous scholars we are honored to assist. Okay, great. Scholars at Risk is celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. Over our first 20 years, SARS pioneered a new solidarity among higher education institutions around the world, building what has become a network of over 500 institutions in 40 countries. This network is organized into national sections and partner networks with leading associations, making SAR services accessible to scholars and students around the world. Over our first 20 years, this community has helped over 1,500 scholars and created over 1,200 positions at 300 host campuses, representing over 20 US million of support for individuals. One main area of SAR's work is protection, which consists of providing direct assistance to threatened scholars. We work with our global network of higher education institutions around the world to arrange short-term, temporary research and teaching positions for threatened scholars. We also provide advisory, referral, and career support services for scholars at risk. Our protection team works directly with the scholars who face threats in their country of origin. We connect with universities in our network to create short-term, temporary academic positions so that these scholars can continue their work in safety. When a scholar applies for assistance, our team reviews each individual's academic and risk backgrounds to determine whether they are a scholar and an individual who has faced risk. As a next step, we explore whether there may be available opportunities within our network. If we determine that we can accept a case for assistance, then we offer a variety of support. This ranges from creating temporary placements at universities to offering career support services. SAR placements are intended to be temporary and range from several months to 2 years, with the average being 1 year. SAR is not a grant-giving organization, and rather universities in our network generally identify the funding to make these positions possible. During the visits, scholars may teach, research, lecture, or study, depending on the needs of the host institutions and the terms established for the visit. We stay in touch with the scholars before, during, and after an academic visit to make sure they are able to make the most of their time at a host university and to plan for next steps. Since SAR's founding, more than 700 scholars have been placed in short-term positions of refuge at our member institutions. Additionally, 100 more scholars have benefited from SAR's advisory and referral services. Scholars at Risk assisted a record 409 scholars this year, including arranging 115 positions. We also provide gap-filling emergency assistance grants. This year, SAR provided 33 emergency grants to scholars for in-country needs, travel for interviews, conferences, or to take up new positions, visa fees, or legal costs. SAR has provided additional support to 383 scholars this year. Alex? I'm so sorry, is it possible for you to mute your end just because we're having a feedback loop? Perfect, thank you so much. Due to spreading conflicts and pressures on academics and universities around the world, Scholars at Risk has continued to receive an elevated number of requests in recent years. This year, receiving 581 new applications, with the majority from Turkey and Syria, and a large number from across the Middle East and North Africa, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. We work with scholars from over 30 countries, but the majority of applications we receive come from Syria and Turkey. Scholars at Risk currently handles a caseload of over 700 scholars seeking assistance. Listed is the disciplines of the SAR scholars we have served for the past year. Scholars at Risk advocacy work aims to increase protection for vulnerable individuals by documenting the problems of attacks of higher education and seeking accountability of perpetrators in order to deter further attacks. We have established several initiatives to identify, document, and take action in response to attacks on scholars, students, and their higher education communities, which I will go into further depth in the upcoming slides. The monitoring project is the foundation of SAR's advocacy work. It's an effort by SAR staff working with a network of volunteer researchers around the world. These include SAR scholars who we've assisted, faculty in human rights programs, and other academic disciplines, and increasingly, students who engage through SAR's legal clinic program. The project identifies, documents, and reports on allegations of attacks on higher education communities. Through the monitoring project, SAR aims to raise awareness of the frequency and persuasiveness of these attacks, generate data-driven advocacy that encourages states and higher education leaders to address these attacks, increase protection for scholars, and increase respect for academic freedom and higher education quality. This is Scholars at Risk's fifth Free to Think report, analyzing thematic and regional trends as well as ongoing issues. Free to Think documents 324 reported attacks in 56 countries from September 1st, 2018 to August 31st, 2019. We acknowledge that this is only a representative sample, truly the tip of the iceberg. So the different types of attacks studied in this report killing, violence, disappearances, imprisonment, prosecution, loss of position, travel restrictions, and other. While they differ from across state and regions and by severity and type, these attacks all share a common motivation: to control or silence higher education institutions and personnel, as well as shrink the space in which we should all have the ability to think, question, and share ideas. What we're seeing is an ongoing phenomenon of attacks on higher education around the world by state and non-state actors in both closed and open societies. The pervasiveness and volume of these attacks across the globe require a robust global response. Obstacles to Excellence extends SAR's annual Free to Think incident reporting by mapping pressures on academic freedom in China and where China has external academic ties, and includes a table of 80 incidents involving 109 attacks. It concludes recommendations for stakeholders in government, higher education, and civil society, inside and outside of China, aimed at supporting China's legitimate higher education ambitions while fully protecting academic freedom as well. The Scholars in Prison Project coordinates advocacy activities on behalf of scholars and students wrongfully imprisoned, as well as against widespread threats to an entire faculty, university, or system. Scholars at Risk conducts both public and private advocacy on behalf of cases under the project, depending on the family's or legal counsel's preferences. We identify potential cases for the Scholars at Risk Scholars in Prison Project through the Academic Freedom Monitoring Project, the media, higher education institutions, scholars, and partner organizations. Scholars at Risk is currently monitoring over 50 cases as part of the Scholars in Prison Project. The picture is of Professor Ilham Tohti, who is a scholar of economics and a public intellectual who was convicted on charges of separatism and sentenced to life in prison in September 2014. He is one of our Scholar in Prison cases. He was recently awarded the European Parliament's prestigious Sakharov Prize to recognize his human rights work. The Student Advocacy Seminar. So students participating in this seminar play an increasingly important role in SAR's advocacy work. Seminar students develop research and leadership skills while advocating on behalf of imprisoned scholars and students identified by SAR's Scholars in Prison Project. This year, students in 14 seminars helped SAR campaign for imprisoned scholars and students. This picture shows a campaign from our Roger Williams Student Advocacy Seminar. Seminar participants put their advocacy skills into practice at SAR's annual Student Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. In this two-day summit, students and faculty participate in a day of leadership and advocacy training with human rights professionals, followed by a day of advocacy on the Hill. Students meet with members of Congress, embassies, associations, and human rights organizations to take action on behalf of imprisoned scholars. SAR's research and learning work aims to increase security for scholars in universities by increasing understanding of academic freedom and related higher education values among states, higher education communities, and the public. As part of SAR's research and learning work, we've published a guide for promoting higher education values, which explores the meaning of academic freedom, why it matters, and how to respond when it is threatened. As part of SAR's, as detailed in this guide and throughout our work, our higher education framework starts with the view that healthy higher education communities matter enormously. They are engines of knowledge production, discovery, innovation, and national progress. We believe that healthy higher education communities must be grounded in core values, including equitable access, accountability, academic freedom, institutional autonomy, and social responsibility. Scholars at Risk understanding of these higher education values are informed by international human rights law, UNESCO instruments, and related civil society statements, which collectively identify these 5 core higher education values. So let me just introduce this first. Building on these publications, SAR and partners co-created an online course on academic freedom called Dangerous Questions: Why Academic Freedom Matters. The course has now engaged more than 2,300 participants from 120 countries, reflecting the international demand for information about academic freedom. And Alex right now will just show you a brief trailer for this course. The Scholars at Risk Speaker Series is a wonderful opportunity for network institutions to bring to campus one or more interesting, courageous SAR scholars, each with a powerful and unique story to share. Through these events, campus communities and the public learn about the threats to academic freedom and attacks on scholars, as well as the scholars' own academic work and experience. These 2 pictures are SAR scholars who have participated in the Speaker Series program. Another important component of our research and learning work is SAR's Network 2020 Global Congress. The Congress is happening on March 25th to 28th, 2020, convened in partnership with Johns Hopkins University and the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS. We would love if you were to join network members, partners, and guests at the 2020 Global Congress to share experiences and develop good practices for navigating these pressures and capturing opportunities to protect threatened scholars, promote academic freedom, and defend everyone's freedom to think, question, and share ideas. The 2020 Global Congress theme, Truth, Power, and Society, the Promise of Higher Education in Challenging Times, reflects 3 core values of higher education: research and teaching leading to new insights and understanding, evidence-based contributions to public discourse and policy, and meaningful engagement with the broadest public good. So, universities, colleges, and individuals of the SAR network have many opportunities to make a difference in protecting threatened scholars and strengthening the university space. SAR staff will work closely with your institution to tailor these activities to your institution needs and capacity. Just want to quickly share a few different ways to get involved with the network. Your university or yourself as an individual could join the SAR network. You can consider inviting a speaker to campus through the SAR Speaker Series. You can organize events to promote academic freedom and related values, host a SAR workshop or webinar on promoting higher education values, and engage students through SAR's Student Advocacy Seminar. If you're interested in getting involved in any of those ways, please sign up for emails at Scholars at Risk and feel free to email us directly at scholarsAtRisk@nyu.edu. That wraps up my presentation. Thank you so much for being with me, albeit remotely, and I look forward to receiving your questions.
That was an applause. Hope you heard it.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, first of all, for your amazing presentation, and thank you so much for not only myself as the representative from the University of Deusto, but also from all the delegates coming from all over the world listening to your presentation. That I have found it really not only interesting from the contents, but also quite hurting, quite sensitive to the things that we do at universities. So first of all, I am going to open the round for just in case someone wants to make any question. Otherwise, I am going to break the ice because I have a couple of reflections. So I don't know if someone here wants to be the first one making some question. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of questions. First one from the student point of view, because I am seeing here some students that we have here at the University of Deusto, so I'm going to make a reflection from them. I have read many things on student advocacy. I am not really familiar with these studies deeply, but it's not so common to find these contents on the curricula. I don't know which is your point on this. Should universities, should higher education institutions work more on how to foster that student advocacy, or do you think that we need to change any other point, or do you think that we are missing any other issue or something around?
Great question. We want to make sure that all members in the higher education community are advocating for themselves and advocating for their own human rights. We really try to tailor some of our programming for students because we want to empower the next generation of academic freedom advocates. So I can go a little bit more into depth with the student advocacy seminar. It really provides universities and students with the opportunities to develop human rights research and advocacy skills by investigating and acting in support of threatened members of the global higher education community. The student advocacy seminars are arranged and supervised by local faculty in partnership with Scholars at Risk, and each seminar takes on the case of one or more scholars facing unjust restrictions, prosecution, and imprisonment. It's an experimental program, and it's tailored to each institution and designed to give students really a foundation in advocacy and academic freedom. It also has really great skill building. So you're able to really develop a foundation in human rights research, standards, and mechanisms, organizing, campaigning, and advocacy, persuasive writing and speaking, and leadership and teamwork skills as well.
Mm-hmm. And my second point, as our dean mentioned before, our university is engaged with all the work that you are doing on Scholars at Risk. And in your presentation, you mentioned that something around a framework on how to shape the values of higher education institutions. These 2 days, we are going to be speaking, debating, and building a conversation on it. So I don't know, I just wanted to get a couple of recommendations from your point of view on how our higher education institutions should shape our values in order to provoke that academic freedom, the academic debate in a liberal way. I don't know. Just to know your point of view on that.
That's a great question. So like I said before, we have developed a higher education values framework and guide to shape all of our conversation when it comes to attacks on higher education and academic freedom issues generally. Our 5 core education values, one of those values is academic freedom. We also have values of equitable access, accountability, institutional autonomy, and social responsibility. We believe that all of those 5 values are as equally important as academic freedom in order to have healthy and respective higher education institutions.
Mhm. And just one more thing related with your answer. If I am not wrong, you have said that there were like 324 attacks on communities. That's really worrying for me at least, because I am not really used to those contexts. So the number was so big for me at least. What is happening there? I don't know if you can provide us more details just to keep our sensitivity to the issue high.
Mm-hmm. So we develop a Free to Think report. This year we had documented 324 reported attacks on higher education communities that can range from killings, violence, disappearances, imprisonment of scholars, prosecution, unlawful prosecution of scholars for their academic work, loss of position, travel restrictions, and other. 324 documented attacks, that's within the capacity of our advocacy team, but that's really only the tip of the iceberg and a representative sample of what we can gather in our year of reporting. These documented attacks were reported from our monitoring project, and it's really, like I said, the foundation of advocacy's work. We gather data-driven advocacy reports, and then we compile them into a Free to Think report.
Mm-hmm. Frightening. So thank you for the details. So I'm going to open the conversation again to the delegates here, just in case anyone wants to raise any question, or otherwise, since we are approaching our lunch time, maybe they are thinking on the refreshment. Oh, yeah, we have a question there. Don't worry, say it loudly because I am going to reproduce it.
So I would ask, how have the governments in the countries they are actually have been responding to their actions?
You mean in this complicated context?
Yes.
Okay. Have you heard the question? No.
I haven't, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the question is about the response of the government, of the public authorities in general, in those social contexts that you were describing before, and in terms of the actions that you are taking there, right? Is that the question? Yep. Are you finding contestability? Are you finding an easy way to act?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. The question is in terms of the response from the government, considering your actions in those social contexts that you were describing before, in those communities, in those attacks.
That's a great question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. It's not one case, one case, simple solution. I think that, in our advocacy efforts, it takes various private and public avenues for advocacy. If we're working specifically with a scholars in prison case, of course, we advocate on behalf of civil society, government and non-government NGOs, and the government and higher education community. We do public advocacy, and we also work in private avenues with the legal counsel and the family. In those scholars in prison cases, we really defer to the family's preferred advocacy routes. So if they are hoping to do kind of inner back route channels of advocacy, we defer to them instead of being more public with our advocacy work. In our Free to Think report, of course, we have sections of calling on states and higher education communities to take action. We list very clearly what those steps should be. And because higher education and academic freedom are embedded in international covenants, human rights law, we defer to what states are party and connected to those human rights law, and then we hold them accountable for that when we write our Free to Think reports. Did that answer the question, do you think, or do you have a follow-up?
Yep. Yep. Very brave activities. So, if there isn't any other question, I think that we are going to thank you once again for your contribution to this pre-event conference, and wishing you to have a really wonderful day, because you have a complete day ahead, not as here in Europe. So thank you so much, and please, you are very welcome to come to our university whenever you want. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry I could not be there in person, but feel free to connect with me at Scholars at Risk at nyu.edu. Follow us on social media, and please visit our website and get involved. We would love to have additional support.
Okay, thank you. Have a good
Goodbye.
day.